I'll skip straight to it. Put seeds in any growing media, potting mix, vermiculite, coconut coir, filter paper in petri dishes, paper towels in a bag, soil from your yard, whatever. Add water. Done. The first germinations should start in less than 24 hours. Complete germination in a couple of days to a week at the most. The trouble is, Anadenanthera peregrina, aka Yopo, only has two extremes: near 100% germination or absolutely no germination. And don't believe the vendors when they say can take up to 6 months to germinate. Both the research literature and my experiments have shown that real, viable peregrina seeds will germinate in the first couple of days, even after months or years of dry storage. For a little background, I tried to get peregrina seeds to germinate for almost a year before success. Over 100 seeds with dozens of trials of varying pretreatment conditions from multiple sources. My first seeds came from a large online vendor. Yes, that vendor. I was doing some in vitro work at the time, so 2 of those seeds went into MS media in 50 milliliter Falcon tubes, and I just kind of left them there to do their thing in the incubator. After a while, I did my usual germination test on filter paper in a petri dish with mild disinfection, but those seeds were rapidly overtaken by mold. So I extended and intensified the disinfection protocol, but that didn't work either. Then I thought that perhaps the disinfection was harming the seeds in some way, so I sowed seeds without any pretreatment. Still overtaken. At this point, I was getting frustrated and confused. The scientific literature reported very good germination across the board, and it would be extremely unlikely that peregrina would be one of the only species in the entire Fabaceae family to have recalcitrant seeds. What was I doing wrong? Perhaps this was just a bad batch. I bought some more seeds from a different vendor and also from a random Redditor. The latter said that they conducted germination testing and achieved better than 60%, so I was very excited. That turned out to be a lie, and their account has since been deleted. So, over 100 seeds later, and still nothing. That's when I finally sourced some really good ones. More on that in a second. Contrary to popular belief and what most vendors seem to claim, peregrina seeds do not lose viability once dried. In fact, they retain viability for much longer when properly dried, exceeding 22 months with germination fractions above 80%. In contrast, undried seeds, or ones stored in a humid environment, become completely non-viable in 6 to 12 months. It seems likely that my seeds thus far had been stored in this manner, hence my failures. That's when another Redditor came along and advertised some peregrina seeds. At first, I was quite hesitant, feeling jaded by my previous attempts. However, they checked all the boxes for viable seed: a history of solid plant identifications, traceable seed collected directly from Peru, and pictorial evidence of germination testing. So I bought as many as I could afford. Right away, it was obvious that these were great seeds. The first germination occurred in less than 24 hours, with the rest following in a few days, for a total of 100% germination. So I began a series of experiments on storage conditions to verify what I had read in the literature. I put 10 seeds in a desiccation chamber with saturated calcium chloride. I removed 5 of those seeds after 7 days and germinated them on filter paper in a petri dish. Again, the germination fraction was 100%. The remaining 5 seeds were tested after 6 months of storage similarly. And again, the germination fraction was 100%. As a control, I also tested my last 6 seeds that had been sitting in a plastic baggie under my desk the entire time, about 7 months. 100% germination as well. There were slight differences in germination speed between the groups, but the difference was statistically insignificant. It's hard to reach significance when you can only afford 20 seeds. Support me. The desiccation treatment did not have an effect. That could be because of the relatively short duration of my experiments, or my seeds could have been properly dried by the vendor. However, I think it would be wise to desiccate any new batch of seeds you obtain, just in case. A few days over saturated salts would extend any viability they currently have without any ill effects. The literature suggests that the ideal storage conditions for peregrina seeds are 40 to 50% relative humidity at 10 degrees Celsius, where they maintain 80% viability for at least 22 months. If you are not familiar, saturated salt solutions maintain a particular and reproducible humidity. In short, combine a salt with just enough water to dissolve some, but not all. That's salt in the chemistry sense, not just sodium chloride table salt, by the way. If the humidity above the solution is greater than the critical value, the undissolved salt will pull moisture from the air. Similarly, if the humidity is less than the critical value, water will evaporate from the solution. By choosing the salt with the right affinity for moisture, you can target any relative humidity that you want. This is especially useful for seed storage, because a saturated salt solution will not overdry your seeds no matter how long you leave them. In contrast, drying with heat or a powerful desiccant like silica gel has the potential to damage your seeds with extended exposure. Saturated salt is also gentler than heat. The biggest downside is that they tend to be more expensive and less scalable than forced air with heat, for example, so their use isn't very common outside of academia. For peregrina, and many other species in fact, desiccation over magnesium or calcium chloride is easy and effective. In my tests, I use calcium chloride ice melt pellets with some water in a glass desiccation chamber. A plastic container with an airtight lid works just as well, though remember to provide a separator for your seeds so they aren't directly exposed to the salt solution. A container in a container works very well. The ratios aren't precise, you just have to make sure that there is a small amount of liquid water sloshing around with lots of salt remaining. If you are attempting to desiccate a lot of seeds at once, remove any excess liquid from the solution and top up the salt periodically. Place your seeds in a chamber in a thin layer if possible. You can even desiccate seeds directly in their paper packets, though this will take longer than exposed seeds. It is difficult to estimate the time needed to bring your seeds to the appropriate water content. A lot of wet seeds in a big pile will take longer than a few dry seeds in a thin layer. If you want to be sure, use a hygrometer. When the reading stabilizes around the predicted relative humidity for that particular salt, around 34% for calcium chloride, your seeds are done. For larger seeds like peregrina, it would be prudent to wait just a bit longer for moisture to migrate from the center of the seed. After that, they can be stored in individual plastic bags without fear of mold. The few peregrina seeds in my test only took a couple of days to reach equilibrium over calcium chloride. If I was going to store them long term, I would have put them into plastic bags in the refrigerator. You can also just leave them in the desiccator like I did for the 6-month test group. Then you just have to germinate your seeds. As stated at the start, hydration is the only germination trigger. Peregrina seeds are neutral photoblastic, so they don't care if they are in light or dark. Otherwise, temperature isn't a major factor in germination. The literature shows just about equal germination fractions at 20 to 30 degrees Celsius. If you only have a few seeds and want to watch them grow, I recommend petri dishes and filter paper. It's best to include 2 or 3 layers of filter paper because these seeds are thirsty. Otherwise, I recommend deep pots. The initial root can stretch upwards of 10 centimeters long, with the shoot stretching another 5 centimeters or more in the first week. Tall nursery pots or containers designed for trees are the best option. Since peregrina is a tree, this makes sense. You can also use tall fabric bags that your mom made for you. Thanks, Mom. Sow the seeds 3 to 4 centimeters deep. Note that this will delay emergence, but probably give your peregrina a healthier start compared to transplanting or shallower sowing. There is mixed evidence for the ideal growing media. Commercial potting mix, sand, vermiculite, earthworm castings, and mixtures of the same have relatively equal germination fractions. So just go with whatever media you are comfortable with. I've been using core perlite hydroponic media and standard peat perlite potting mix with equal success. If you are using deep pots, the seedlings can take about 2 weeks to actually break the surface, so don't start worrying until after that. Oh, and the literature suggests that only about 2/3 of seedlings will survive to maturity. A high mortality rate is common for pioneer species like peregrina. You aren't doing anything wrong if you kill a few of your seedlings. That's just a technique for the species' long-term survival. Also, your nose will let you know when the seeds have gone bad. I mean, the decaying seeds smell really bad. Like if you left a bowl of wet green peas out to mold on your counter for a week and took a big whiff, but kinda acidic, you know? Seriously, it's offensive. And that's the kind of hardcore science you'll get around here. Another thing I recommend is a good quality inoculant. Peregrina is in the Fabaceae family and can form symbiotic nodules with nitrogen-fixing bacteria. These bacteria exchange nitrogen compounds for sugar from the plant's roots, benefiting both. In natural stands, about half of the tree's nitrogen comes from these nodules, and the other half comes from free-living nitrogen-fixing bacteria in the soil. As with non-leguminous plants, they also benefit from the regular old mycorrhizal microorganisms. Early inoculation with a broad-spectrum microbial inoculant that features Acalospora, Gigaspora, and Gloma species will help with phosphorus absorption and rhizobium for nitrogen fixation. Ideally, you would use rhizobia cultured from mature, healthy peregrina trees. However, since the nearest stand of peregrina is probably over 5,000 kilometers from me, I'm gonna settle for commercial inoculants. If you have access to clover, it might be worth attempting to transfer from their roots. Dig up some of the clover roots and mix them into your peregrina media. I haven't tried that personally. However, you also run the risk of inoculating with pathogenic species as well, so perhaps wait until your plants are well established before attempting this. Any seed inoculant intended for peas, beans, clover, and other legumes should work. You can inoculate at sowing, germination, or transplanting, as long as the inoculum is touching the root system. Now, you might say to yourself, compost has nitrogen bacteria, I'll just use that. And you'd be partially correct. Compost does naturally have bacteria that fix nitrogen. They just aren't endosymbiotic. Azotobacter and Azotospirillum bacteria from compost live in the soil doing their own thing. Rhizobium lives inside the plant roots and has integrated exchange mechanisms with the host plant. So you want to get a special inoculant for peregrina. Every time you transplant your new peregrina, be on the lookout for amorphous blobs on the roots. They are a sign that rhizobia have integrated nicely with your healthy plant. If you don't see any, an additional inoculation won't hurt. In the end, your success will be almost entirely dependent on your sourcing. If you are lucky enough to have a botanist friend of a friend passing through Peru, have them pick up some seeds for you. Otherwise, it's going to be a lot of trial and error, unfortunately. If your seed vendor doesn't give you the results of a germination test, there's a reason. However, that doesn't stop someone from straight up lying, or rather passing on unverified claims from a third party, which happened to me. I likely won't have seeds available for a while, or ever. Peregrina takes several years to produce seeds, and Kansas doesn't have the best climate for peregrina without a very large greenhouse. So just try your best to find a good vendor. It's a jungle out there, and not in a good way with lots of plant growth. Stay safe and grow. Also, follow me on Reddit and Instagram and give my website a read. I post things there before I make videos. Way before. That darn cat.